based on that conversation, Mark and I thought it would be a really good idea to have a workshop, one of many, by the way, and start putting together a wiki to help software engineers make sense of all of the different AI tools out there, help them figure out what it is that makes sense for them. If you can't make a decision today, at least you understand and are more equipped to better make a decision. So there are a few key takeaways from this conversation. Two main buckets. The first one is, what am I doing every day that I need AI to help me with? We have software development, testing, and then shipping. We're probably not going to spend too much time on the shipping side of things. I think production engineers probably can be focused more on the software development and the testing. So that's like your day to day, if not your week to week. And then the key takeaway for this workshop, I hope that all of you can walk away at least being able to answer these questions. Number one, okay, I know it's out there. So we'll give you a list of vendors, and I have lab notes that I'll share with all of you during this workshop. We have a list of vendors that you can walk away saying, okay, at least I know what's out there. This list is not exhaustive. I'd love to hear feedback from any of you. If you've come across any companies or tools that I missed, we'll add it to the list. But at least you have some sort of baseline to work with. And then the second question is, I know what I should be looking for. And I think that's probably the hardest question to answer. And we'll attempt to do that during this workshop. If you are wondering if we're going to give demos of these products, unfortunately, no. You'll very soon realize, based on the list of vendors, we'll probably need an entire week to do demos for everybody. However, we are going to get a chance to pick Mark's brain, who not only is an active daily user of GitHub Copilot, he's also an inventor and creator of an AI company to help software engineers. And he'll share his product here pretty soon. So first question we want to probably answer is, what should I be looking for? And I guess I'm going to pass the mic to you, Mark. Before you, I don't want to say became married to your suite of tools, what were some of the thought processes that went through your brain as you were qualifying what's out there?
It's interesting. The first really use case where I found value in ChatGPT, which is probably the first AI tool I used. So ChatGPT didn't come out that long ago. So we're talking last 6 months, was sadly the longer you're a software developer and the more you move up into management, the more you have to start getting into doing spreadsheets. And despite being a very experienced coder, my spreadsheet foo was very bad. Writing formulas for Google Sheets that reference other sheets is totally something a CFO can do and I can't do at all. But I found that ChatGPT was amazing at doing that. So when I would have to cross-reference an employee census against a set of salary data, if I had 2 sheets, I could just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I've got this column in this sheet. How do I tell if it exists in this column in another sheet? And it'll write the formula for it. And so I spent a whole day accelerating through the learning of Google Sheets by using ChatGPT to fill in a skill that I probably should have had long ago, but never did. So that's what kind of got me curious using it more. And then fortunately, I'd contributed to enough open source. I wouldn't say I'm a prominent open source developer, but through working at companies and various things, I had enough open source commits to where GitHub would put me in the free Copilot beta. And so I've been using Copilot since the very beginning. And it's an amazing tool that I'll never live without again. In fact, I have 2 GitHub accounts, and one of them is far less convenient for me to use, which is not the Macaru one. And I use that one anyway, so that I can get Copilot in Visual Studio Code, because I just feel like I'm programming with one hand tied behind my back unless I have it. So I can show a few things for folks that are curious about how I use it. It's not cheap. If you commit a bunch of open source, then you can get it for free. So I recommend trying to see if you can do that. But I think it's something like $20 a month or something like that if you don't have the free license. But it's still highly worth it, in my opinion. I would buy it if I didn't have it for free. So
But here's a dumb question for you, Mark. I just kind of want to get this out of the way. I think a lot of people who haven't really dabbled in AI yet, are going to ask this question. Why not just use ChatGPT for a lot of the use cases?
Yeah, you could. In fact, the two are kind of similar. Copilot is more or less it's the bridge between IntelliSense, or just code completion that we've had in IDEs since the dawn of IDEs, and full on chat. So it has all of the context of your file and of parts of your project there at all times. And so it can do some pretty scary, smart things to just help accelerate you. So there's like, I think about the use cases as maybe two categories. One is just like accelerating the speed at which you can write code. Like, you know how to write the code, but it can write it for you faster than you can type it out. So sometimes when you're doing repetitive things, like if I'm building out a list of possibilities for a drop down in an application, it can start to guess what the next one I'm going to type is, and it just maintains the format and lets me just move faster. So it's like accelerated IntelliSense. And then there's the other one, which is more like, all right, I'm sitting down to write a login form. I don't know how to give it context. And so sometimes your instinct is, well, let me just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need a login form that tracks these things. And this is the language. Please give it to me. And then you copy it out of there and you paste it in. And you can accomplish a lot of that stuff in the editors as well, just by writing the comments first. And then it'll figure out, oh, you want to write the code for these comments. It goes ahead and does that. So I try not actually to use ChatGPT for programming that much. I try to stay in Copilot just because I can move faster, but you have to kind of know how to trick it into knowing what context you're working in.
Okay, so the repeating theme that I hear from you is context. ChatGPT can probably get you some very quick answers, but it is, and this is a key concept that I'm going to keep emphasizing on this workshop, is that there's a lot of AI tools out there, but one of the first categories, like if you look at it as like a pyramid or, top down or reverse pyramid, whatever, at its foundation is what should be looked at as a generalist tool. It's super powerful intrinsically. So kind of like, what's that old phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, right? When it comes specifically to software engineers, like you can have a lot of fun with it, but one of the key things that it lacks is, like you said, context of your code. And so GitHub Copilot gives you that.
Yeah, it gives you it in a measure. And so here's one of the limits of AI as it stands today is context. So when you go and use ChatGPT, here, visual aid is probably useful. I have ChatGPT always docked here. You can see on the left, like here are all the chats I've had, and you can keep them around and jump back into them. You can imagine each one of these is a different topic. And so it will use all of the context of that chat. Like here, I was messing around with some Ruby on Rails question. It'll use all that context for future answers. So it can better predict what you're talking about. And if you like context switch on it, and I just start talking about like baseball stats or something here, the answers are not going to be as rich as they would be if I stayed on this context. But if you use the APIs underneath the hood that power this thing, you very quickly realize that you can't feed it a lot of context. You're limited to a few thousand tokens or maybe 10,000 characters roughly of context that you can feed OpenAI for it to answer a question. So you can't like take your physics textbook, all 300 pages, somehow magically scan it in and be like, now I want to ask questions. OpenAI itself can't do that. And so even when you're programming and you have the context of like, here, what random piece of code do I have open in my Visual Studio Code? Like, it probably can feed in stuff from this file, but it doesn't feed it like my entire project and the whole architecture behind it and the frameworks I use. It's a very limited window that it has to look at to figure out what in the hell you're talking about and how to best answer you. So that's hopefully a problem that gets solved. In fact, I just released a tool today that maybe we'll talk about later called Fire Away that helps solve some of that for documentation use cases. But that's the limit that you hit pretty quickly with AI.
So if you go back to your ChatGPT screen, I don't know how extensive the audience is using ChatGPT. I've been in it every single day. Like my life is completely dependent at this point, professional and personal. I'm talking everything from like shopping lists to recipes, groceries, putting together like Montessori type activities for my kids. It not only has just replaced Google, it's like 1000x me as a person. I mean, just like the creativity that I was able to put behind organizing my son's birthday party. My wife is like, this is insane. Like you're like, by the time she gets home from work, it's like everything's done and it's all creative and super cool. Anyway, okay, that was a tangent. But looking at Mark's screen, when he says there's a limitation, so one thing to note here is that this on the left-hand side, every single one of these are individual threads, right? And there's no context between this thread and the next thread. So ChatGPT is dumb in understanding like you can't carry a conversation from one into the other. That's one limitation. Second limitation is within each thread, you are limited to a character count. So what was the example you gave? You can't bring in your entire physics book and then ask the questions because there's literally a data limitation. I know this myself personally from experience because I have multiple threads that I just keep training the model over the course of a few months. And it's so sluggish that it's not even answering, like I can't even get an answer out of it anymore because it takes time for the actual thread to load in the browser. And it's not local computational resources, it's remote, which means that there's a limitation on ChatGPT side. When they solve for this, I don't know. But that's probably, I would say, the biggest handicap right now is that the human mind, once you learn how to use this thing, you push it to its limits.
Yeah, and you can see some of the limits here. If anybody's interested in getting into AI development, I highly recommend OpenAI, which is like really easy to get started with. And it's pretty dirt cheap as long as you're not doing it at scale. So the one that we're all familiar with, unless you're a paying customer of ChatGPT, the model, so to speak, that they're using is this GTP 3.5 Turbo. And that's the amount of context that can have 4,000 tokens. And a token is like a little bit shy of a word. It's like roughly 4 characters. And then they recently released a 16,000 context version that it's about twice the cost for tokens. So yeah, it's still pretty limited. Like I think this is like a few pages of a legal document. And then this is maybe the whole document, but it's still not like an entire library of information.
Why do you think that limitation exists? Is it a software problem or a hardware problem? I know it's a dumb question.
The world's probably running out of GPUs. I know I have some friends that work at NVIDIA and there's, stock has mooned recently because everybody is now buying up all the GPUs to be able to do this. Yeah, I imagine we're between that and crypto mining, boy, we've really exhausted all the world's computing resources. This one I think is actually useful. I don't know if crypto mining really is.
That's a whole different, probably workshop or just frankly, a whole different debate. Okay. So basically like the old adage still applies here is that humans are still limited on how far they can push software with hardware constraints. And AI is definitely no exception.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, these things are so useful and so incredible. It feels like it's like a decade or two leap ahead when they released GPT. So I just imagine the amount of traffic they're getting from people trying it, using it as just end users. It's got to be truly immense. So it's an unenviable problem to have to decide these limits and lock things down and scale. And I remember like just maybe a month and a half ago, ChatGPT was down like every morning. And it's pretty rewarding as a software developer to be able to make something that can go down a lot and still people will trip over themselves trying to use it. Like they don't care that it's flaky because it's so valuable. So kudos to the inventors of this stuff. But it's a whole different like set of tools that's like the dawn of the cloud all over again. And I think it behooves everybody to learn how to leverage them because there's a lot of businesses to be made, a lot of products to be made there.
Yeah. I had a question on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Let's go for it.
Okay. So, I'm a data engineer and I was using it to build some tables and do some stuff like, you could take a file, let's say, a flat file and build the table for you and ingest it in, and it would do it right in Snowflake and all that. But I guess I'm concerned about the security, of like putting data and real data into the thing, into the model. I'm just wondering, is that something that we should be concerned about or not have to be concerned about that? Or
yeah, probably you should. In fact, I've been exploring this space because I think what's intriguing is, can we build AI products for private data? Because OpenAI really shouldn't be used for private data right now. You're basically handing over your data to something that is using that data to train itself further. But if you look at the kind of commercial version, Microsoft is behind both OpenAI and Azure OpenAI. They do at least give you, I don't know how legally binding any of this is, but they will tell you that the stuff you type in is not available to other customers, not available to OpenAI, not used to improve OpenAI models. And so it'll be like the cloud, I imagine. At some point, businesses will start to trust or have to trust feeding their data into these type of AI models because of the value that it brings. But with OpenAI, I just assume everything you're feeding it is public. That's one of the nice things about Makaru is that because it's all fake data, it's like not that sensitive. So I think it's appropriate for that use case. But if I was building a tool to be able to, like, let's say, chat with all of the institutional knowledge of my company to figure out, what's been tried before, what's been done before, like that would be scary. I might trust Azure, but I wouldn't trust OpenAI with that.
Yeah, right. Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
That's a really good question. And that's a theme that's going to probably repeat here pretty soon. So I imagine the audience is probably wondering now, all right, okay, cool. So we've disqualified ChatGPT. Probably a few use cases I can explain to it what I want, but it's not going to scale for me day-to-day production software engineer. So let me, if I may, I'm going to share my screen. These are the lab notes. I'm going to actually, let me go ahead and share this as well for everybody in the chat. Let's go over this together. So this is the preliminary research that I've done. I definitely want this document to be living and breathing. So feel free to bookmark this and we'll reference this continually over the future and maybe even have some more workshops. But this is what I put together. Most of this came from researching, well, definitely Google. I went through a lot of different VCs websites to see who they've been funding. So a lot of these are getting seed stage or series A or B. A lot of incumbents. Can you guys see my screen? A lot of incumbents. So you definitely have your Microsoft and your Googles, obviously making a play in the space. But then there was the challenge of like, well, how do you categorize these? Now, I've given it a shot at trying to categorize it. So if you go to the construct, I call it construct, but this is basically my attempt at trying to make sense of this. This is too long of a list for my own taste. So I'm going to probably improve this here pretty soon, but this is like my first attempt at trying to categorize this. I also broke it down by SDLC stages. The focus here is going to be on code, but there's a whole bunch more that's out there and it probably doesn't really apply to you. I think coding and testing probably for software engineers are the most relevant. Anyway, so if you go back to the welcome page, these are the list of tools. Now I do have a flag here called IDE plugin. Is it an IDE plugin? If it is, that's flagged. And then if you go to these child pages, these are still being worked out, but it'll automatically filter it. So I eventually want to make this a lot more exhaustive. I also want to give it scores, but there's a lot of products to go through and demo and test. So we got to reach out to them, try to get some demos, some free licenses if we can, because it's pretty expensive to buy all of these. And then maybe even get in touch with the vendors to see if they can give us some demos and just, like the non-salesy pitch, like just get straight to the point and then give these scores and then score all of the different products based on the use cases. So definitely bookmark this tab. I definitely want it to be a living document. Now, a few of the tools that we did discuss that are on this list are Microsoft, GitHub Co-Pilot, which we're going to jump into here in a bit with Mark. Makaru, which Mark did talk about. I guess, are you launching it today? Is today the actual launch date?
Yeah, well, so the new tool called Fire Away, which is the thing you see on the right there, Fire Away but it's pronounced Fire Away. Yeah, I literally just turned it on today for this webinar. Basically, the idea is it allows you to easily create an AI virtual assistant, chatbot, whatever you want to call it, for your own data, whether it's your own documentation or your own website. So like, I imagine some of the first users of this are going to be people who are building technical products that have a public documentation site and want to be able to give users a ChatGPT-like experience for things that ChatGPT hasn't learned yet. Because one of the limitations I didn't mention, but I should have, is that ChatGPT is trained on the internet as of like 2 years ago. It's not trained on the internet as of yesterday. So if you build something new, you have this new hurdle to get over where not only do you not have a community because it's new, but the AI tools can't help your users because it's new. So that was the problem I saw. And so I put together some things to make it really easy to just like sign up for an account, scan your website, and then put a chat bot on your website, or just, chat within the tool itself. So that's what FireAway is. Happy to dig into it later.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. So we definitely want to chat more about that here in a little bit. So we'll come back to that. Going back to the list here. I should probably also mention, I mean, besides the obvious, I do work for Sapient AI. I'm not endorsing anyone from a commercial perspective. I do want to keep it as fair and as objective as possible so that you do get some honest feedback. I mean, I'm definitely partial towards Sapient, which is why I work here. And I'm sure Mark also very partial towards his, but we will try to give you some honest feedback. As a matter of fact, some of these tools obviously all compete with each other. And I didn't exclude anybody based off of that criteria. In the best interest of being honest. I just want to put that out there, a little disclaimer. Cool. Okay. So today, let's jump into, I think, GitHub Co-Pilot. I would love to look at that as a generalist tool. Let's discuss the pros and the cons. Cons being probably the limitations and most importantly, the use cases. Mark, I'll let you take the mic on that.
Yeah, sure. Let me show a thing. And then I don't know if you mentioned this before, but there's a kind of alternative to Copilot, which is a fork of VS Code called Cursor, which is even more AI forward. So I'll contrast those two as we're in here. So like, imagine, let me pull up a thing I was working in recently. I think it's like, actually, I have it open in Cursor, so I'll pull it open here. Cursor has Copilot built in as well. It's just a fork of VS Code. So to the use case I was talking about accelerating before, I was putting together the code to customize the chatbot look and feel in FireAway. And so I was adding all these like parameters to the URL so that you can set header font size, header font weight, etc. And one of the ways that it can accelerate stuff is just like if I do header font style, it automatically knows roughly what I'm trying to do based on the previous lines. And so I just hit tab and then like done. Now I could have typed all that stuff out, but you can imagine the speed at which you can work if you're doing repetitive tasks like that. So like, it's not really some discontinuous breakthrough, but it does help you move kind of at the speed of light. And maybe it takes you from a 1x developer to like a 3x developer.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yeah, sure.
When we say code suggestion or code completion, I see every vendor is trying to like use these buzzwords. Is that specifically what we're talking about?
Yeah, pretty much. Like the historical code suggestion was more like, all right, given that it probably knows what a URL params object is, I could hit control space and it would bring up, all the stuff. You could do this in the 90s with whatever your favorite Eclipse or whatever. Now you can get like whole lines or whole functions, just by doing like header opacity, for example. Once I start typing, it figures out, okay, I need to follow the patterns of the line before it, and you're probably trying to do this, and that's a reasonable default. And sometimes it's a little creative and you have to adjust it, but it does help you move a lot faster.
Can we push this thing to its limit? Do you have a more sophisticated example? Like, can it add an entire method to a class just based on?
So here's one. Let me just create a random file in here that I'll have to delete later. So let's say I'm building like a login form.jsx. So I could literally do like a React login form and see if it manages to do it. Let's do like this function login form. See if it figures out what I'm trying to do.
This is a new file?
Yeah, this is a new file. So you can see in the bottom, it's taking a little longer and it's spinning. So it's probably, going to spit out a whole thing here. That's my whole login form. So let's see, what did it do? It's pretty good. Like it only used primitive stuff that's built into React, like use state, and basic HTML. It didn't assume I used like some component library or anything. Now that you can do quite easily with Copilot. I could also like do something like this, where I could take all of this, I could go into ChatGPT and say like, here is my login form. Can you rewrite that to use React hook form to manage state? So rather than using use state, use this popular library called React hook form.
So, sorry, I'll let you keep going.
So you can see it understood that. It's now like importing the stuff from React hook form, and it's rewriting that whole form using this new library. So I actually used this as like a practical use case a while ago. I was used to this library called Formic. And, one of the easiest ways to learn is like, can you explain this new thing in terms of things I already understand? Like, what would this look like in Formic? Or what would this Formic form look like in React hook form? So I just fed it in, and that's the way I learned React hook form. So it's really good at like refactoring. And then Cursor, just to finish my thought, and then I'll pause. I believe in Cursor, you can kind of do the same thing. So if you do like Command L, you can do like, can you rewrite this with React hook form? Let's see if that actually does what I want. No, it's doing a search. Maybe it's here. Refactor to use React hook form. Not that impressive. So that's what they're trying to do, is basically bring ChatGPT into the IDE so you don't have to go and leave. It only generated the one line for me. So maybe if I would have done that like here, it would have been better.
Can we just pause really quick here? So we talked about code completion, code suggestion. What you just demonstrated here is what? Conversational AI to code?
Yeah, this is like requirements to code basically. And then conversational refactoring. That's one of the harder things I find, is the refactoring bit. That's where ChatGPT is really good. And it's tough to coax the editor into doing that. Like, the only way you can kind of chat with your editor is through comments. And sometimes that works pretty well. Like if I did like, let's say, submit handler here, it would probably figure out, yeah, it's starting to figure out what I want. Sometimes it'll write like a whole block for you, and sometimes it just does it one line by line.
So Mark, you know your code better than we do. What it just created for you, just looking at it, is this high quality code? Is it adhering to the code standards that you already established? Like if you check this in, are your teammates going to be like, yo, dude, you obviously use some sort of like, code generator, like, but this sucks. Like, don't do that, please, Mark. Or are you like, wow, Mark, you are a genius and you're going to get a raise and a promotion?
I would say your mileage varies very wildly based on the particular framework or pattern that you're using. And it's normally correlated with how much community there is behind that. So React and JavaScript results are great because JavaScript developers have been nothing but yak about React for 10 years. And so like, it just has so much material to learn off of. But if you go and try to do something in like Rust or something newer, mileage may vary. So as primarily a web developer, my experience has been very good. Some of the people I work with that are more like systems developers have not been so happy with ChatGPT in general.
So one of the arguments about ChatGPT is that it is great for beginners. And the counter argument to that is that no, like you have to have experience in whatever domain that you're in this case, software engineering, right? To know what good looks like or what great looks like, to be able to really leverage the power of this thing. So if like a junior programmer steps in there, yeah, they can get a lot of code suggestions, but they don't know what good versus great looks like. They don't have that experience. Whereas, so I guess my question is can a senior, super seasoned software engineer get utility from these types of AI products?
Absolutely. So I classify myself as that. I've been programming for like 20 years now. And my other peers who have similar experience are all pretty devout users of Copilot at this point. The funny thing is, like, I actually feel like I get more resistance from people with less experience than people with more experience. Maybe just like at a certain age, you become very pragmatic and you're like, no longer have the pride of, can I do this myself? But yeah, I use it to move fast. And yeah, a lot of times I have to correct it, but a lot of times it just like gets me started on typing 20 lines of a thing that I could type, but why when it's just going to do it immediately?
So here's a loaded question. software engineers all start adopting AI, and now you have like, let's say 10x or 5x, or in some cases 100x worth of features just coming out. Like your velocity just gets unleashed to a whole new scale. And one of the challenges, obviously, of pushing features out there and writing new code is that you have to test against it. So there is a check and balance that exists within any modern professional, pipeline. Is there a check and balance with AI, or are you starting to suffer from code sprawl where you're getting a lot of code just going out there in production?
I don't know that there is a check and balance yet. I mean, it definitely helps me generate more code more fast. I I built this new fire away thing, probably in a month of very intense work. And I don't think I could have done it nearly as fast, but that's a new thing out there in the world with bugs and problems and all that now. So I think that's probably a really good segue into what Sapient does, because, as a person who's had to write unit tests, sometimes for benefit and sometimes for chore, having something that can write all the unit tests for you, like immediately I can viscerally understand the value of that. So I don't know if you were planning to show, but I think it would be cool for people to see.
I wasn't planning on, let's see, time check really quick. I wasn't really planning on doing a demo myself, but Rishi, if you're on the line, he is, maybe we could just do a quick little demo on what generative AI looks like in the context of writing tests.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Omed, and thanks for the conversation, Mark. But I think the one thing was really interesting that you showed, and is that, the AI is awesome to get started, and probably AI is awesome to move fast. But the ultimate responsibility lies with the individual to make sure that whatever the code that is being generated is correct, or is of the highest quality. And I think it's really important that, people to understand that there is a layer, there is a human layer, or maybe the software layer that has to constantly verify to make sure whatever the AI is producing is not necessarily of the mediocre quality or not necessarily incorrect.
Yeah, definitely. It's easy to understand when you own your own business, because in the end, I'm not trying to please a boss. I'm trying to make something that actually works for the market. And so if it doesn't work, it's going to reflect poorly on me, and I'm going to have to stay up all night troubleshooting it. So yeah, actually, like, I don't know how I would feel if I was a junior developer and this thing was writing all this code for me. Is it going to expose me as an imposter? I don't know. I have no fear of that now, 20 years on, that like, I just need it to help me move faster. But in the end, I know what I want.
Yeah, totally. The another interesting thing that is, you did mention about the size of the context. And so let's say, if you feed a pretty humongous size of the context, things, start, deteriorating. And so, in my experience, what I have seen it is that, if your code is pretty huge, which is the case in the real world scenario, your code, like your methods, could be 100 lines long, or, and could be even longer. And I think that's where things might not be as expected. What I really, really loved about the ChatGPT or even the Copilot was the fact that any kind of standard code, something that I would have found it over the Stack Overflow, I definitely don't need to do that research, and probably, I could just equate it at my fingertips and use it. And so I think that has been the main motivation for creating this Sapient. I think, we really wanted to go deep, really wanted to just, position ourselves into the world of the software testing. And, we have built our product. We have launched our company a couple of months ago. It's available in the form of the IDE at the JetBrains marketplace. And so, I'll just do a quick demo. Again, for the demo purpose, I don't necessarily want to use the 50 lines or the 100 lines of the code, because then it becomes very hard to understand everything. I'm using a simple program called, the use service. It's a really, really simple, just a method that takes a couple of parameters like user ID and password, but then, it goes through the few steps trying to make sure, this is, the correct user ID and password combinations. And so, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. So, it's a simple step, if the user ID is null, throw some exception, else try to find out some from the repository, to go through the steps to make sure user is, enabled, and then you try to match the password hash. Really simple, 10 lines of the code. But, when you start thinking about the testing, and especially bringing the QA mindset, then, you'll have to think about a lot of use cases, as a software developers, very, very positive, always get started with positive use cases. But then very soon you'll have to jump into those different edge cases and the boundary conditioning. You'll end up writing so much of code. And I think this is where, the AI can really, really excel. So I, as an individual developer, instead of writing, the hundreds of lines of the code for what to look like a simple 10 lines of the code, I don't have to do it. I could actually just leverage the AI to get things done. So, I have the Sapient AI installed in my IDE. I could simply launch the plugin. And so now, I start getting the help in this more QA guidance that, hey, for this particular method, these are the possible use cases look like. Technically, the number of use cases will simply explode depending on the amount of the code. And I think this is where a lot of the computer science goes behind, trying to bring the QA mindset, make sure we reduce the optimal number of the test cases that can bring the maximum coverage into the source code. And so you can go into the individual test cases, try to understand the input, output, try to understand all the other logical layers that you'd like to isolate. Probably you might want to create marks or stars and try to get some kind of test data. And the tool does it for you. The tool allows, to generate the code. And, you can make the changes, you can, customize, you can do all the things, you can review it. Like if you trust enough, you can just simply generate the code for all the test cases and, get everything in one go, and and I'm done. And so basically now it's going through this testing the process where it will give you the quick result. Now, one of the interesting thing that you come across in the software development process is you want to write the high quality code. You want to write follow all the engineering best practices. Bring this in modular codes, bring the testable code that is maintainable in the long run. But one of the biggest challenges that you'll come across is that the code is never static, which means that, the requirement could be changing or, maybe, something else changes that, that forces you to go and make the changes. And so there is always a process of the reconciliation that you have to do it from the software developer perspective that, how is the code changing? What are the different test cases that are emerging out of it? What are the test cases that are, dropping out of it? And so just to simulate that experience, here I'm going to, to make some change that, hey, there is a user that I forgot to handle null pointer exception. And so if the user is null and I just want to return to false. And so, the AI is really great in generating the code, but, there is a sort of ecosystem that you have to build around it to understand these changes, understand the diff that has to be, taken up, like what are the test cases that are coming out of it and, getting dropped and so on. And so now with the help of the Sapient AI, I was able to detect those new test cases and I can simply ask to go ahead and reconcile and generate the test cases for me. It was able to detect the newer set of test scenarios and it was able to get generated. Right. And so again, when we started, it was a 4 the test. Now, it came up with the 5 tests. There is a unit testing, involved into the service layer. There are a lot of unit testing that do it at the REST endpoint layer, at the various layer. And the Sapient AI is pretty equipped to handle and, create the high quality, the unit tests for various layers. This is one of the layer, the Spring Boot controller, where we are able to publish the REST endpoint. Again, there are different line of thoughts. A lot of people love the unit testing. When it comes to the REST endpoint, people like to do this integration testing. And it's really important to understand that, when it comes to integration testing, you're not only validating the method, but you're also validating, some of the transport layer activity. In other words, what are the objects that are getting shipped, the back and forth. You want to make sure those are getting serialized properly. And you have a very high quality code, which is validating this entire serialization process. So yeah, I think this is Sapient AI. I think we are the AI company, but, we are trying to position ourselves, far deeper into the software testing. And so not only the simple code, but really very complicated, the hundreds of lines of code, something that we can handle and we can, create the experience where the software developers can, stay very productive.
Thank you. Thank you, Rishi. So I do want to share with the audience that I had a conversation with Rishi last week, and he did agree to giving away free licenses on this call. So if you do install the plugin and you're interested, I'll put my email here. Shoot me an email, and I will make sure that you get your free license for Sapiens. I think it was a 6-month license.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we can, we can be more aggressive. I think we can just figure it out, but definitely minimum of 6 months.
Cool. Awesome. Definitely take advantage of that. This is a workshop only offer. Thank you, Rishi. I would love to get a demo of also Fire Away. Mark, if you want to share your screen and show us what you built.
Yeah. And likewise, I would love to have anybody who's interested sign up. You can have it for free because it's really new. But basically the idea, if you go to mockaroo.com right now, maybe you're more familiar with, this looks like your standard like intercom chat button here, but it's not. It's my new thing, Fire Away, as it loudly and proudly announces here. And you can do things like, let's say, if I have a start date field and an end date field, how can I make sure end date is after the start date? So it's answering using Mockaroo formulas, which, I think a little bit too humble to say that like LLM has actually indexed all this stuff and understands it. So how did it do that? Basically, Fire Away, I just pointed it at mockaroo.com and it crawled the website. It scanned all the content, and then it organizes it in such a way that it can feed it into AI just in time to answer questions like this. So if you actually logged in as me in my account, you can see I have one project called Mockaroo, and by default, it goes to like what your chat will look like, and you can chat with the information base like right here in line. But if you look, the way that I set it up is that I just pointed it at mockaroo.com. I gave it 2 root URLs. This is obviously the homepage. And then this is like an index that no one really ever needs to look at, but it just makes sure it's almost like a sitemap and make sure that it's picking up all my documentation, some of which is like embedded within parts of the product that it may not be able to find. So I just gave it that, and then it crawled and found all these pages and it indexed them all. It basically pulled out the text content. So like, where did it get that from? Probably got some of that from formulas. So if I go here, you can see what content it found, and it just pulls out all the text from the HTML because it doesn't need to like semantically scan your divs and your styles. And then it breaks them up into like paragraphs, reasonably sized chunks, and indexes it all so that when a user asks a question, we can search the database, find the relevant information, and feed it into AI just in time to answer any question like that. So the idea is that this thing recrawls your website kind of continuously. And when you push out a new product feature, it immediately, can provide ChatGPT-like solutions for that new thing, which ChatGPT knows nothing about. So that's one use case. That was the original driver of it, is like anybody who's building a product where you have technical documentation and you don't have a support staff to answer questions on intercom. Wouldn't it be great if you could have AI answer questions and give really accurate answers, but you can't wait 1.5 years for, OpenAI to actually index your site. So that's the original use case, but you can also do things like log in and upload files. So it can take all these types of files, PDF, Word, XML, PowerPoint, etc. And you can even do something as like mundane, but quite useful, as like my wife uploaded the manual for our Miele washing machine, which is like very intense in its content and its maintenance needs. If you've ever used like a German product, you maybe understand. And, it's like a 130-page manual, but you can start asking it things like, hey, what type of maintenance do I need to do in terms of cleaning? And it finds the right thing, and it speaks very conversationally with you and answers questions. So I imagine this will be useful for people who just want to like chat with a body of documentation, whether it's contracts or manuals or, old fashioned product documentation that we still get in PDFs sometimes. So you can use any combination of websites and files and build this kind of a chatbot immediately. you don't actually have to publish the chatbot anywhere. You can just go here and chat with it. So if you had a bunch of collaborators that all wanted to be able to chat against the same base of documents, you just invite them to Fireway, they log in and they can chat here. But you can also publish the widget to your website like you see on Makaru. And that's how I plan to have paid subscribers, is by folks who publish things. So, and then like last but not least, you can see all the interactions that people have had with your chat and whether or not they've given it thumbs up and thumbs down. Here's the question I just asked, and there's the response. And it'll even give you like the approximate costs of these things. So the idea being that you basically bring your own OpenAI key, or you can use it for more private use cases by bringing your own Azure OpenAI key. And I don't charge a markup on that. I just you're literally paying Azure for each individual message. And you can see they're pretty cheap. That was 2 cents. That was some fraction of a cent to respond. I just charge a fixed fee to host the site and to do all the document indexing for you. So it should be very affordable. And again, I can keep my costs low because I'm just one person. So I'm trying to be disruptive in that way while providing some pretty useful stuff. So that's the idea.
But yeah, super awesome. I wish we had more time. I have 1,001 questions for you and Rishi, but for the sake of time, we are coming close. If anybody has any question, please unmute yourself. Feel free to jump in, or you can ask in the chat. I did have a question that was posed to me in private. I can ask it publicly. Mark, have you used any other tools besides Copilot, like Amazon Code Whisperer?
I've not used Code Whisperer. No, I pretty much use Copilot all the time. I never had a need to go outside of that because darn thing's just been so useful. Between that and ChatGPT, I just started using this cursor thing with somewhat mixed results. I like the editor, but figuring out how to get it to do what you want is sometimes a little crazy. So it's all very early days. Yeah, pretty much stuck to that. Now, one thing we should do a webinar on is how to use all these APIs, because obviously Fireway is built on top of OpenAI. Makaru has features built on top of OpenAI. So I actually spend far more time learning how to use the tools to build stuff on top of than I have using the tools to build stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. So I did actually get a couple of emails asking for the license. So I'm just going to answer it really quick. I think you guys are also on the call. You want to go to the JetBrains marketplace to download and install plugin. I can actually get you the link for that. And then after you install the plugin, create your account and then shoot me an email, and then I'll make sure that your account, your license is provisioned. So let's get you the link to the plugin here in the chat. There you go. And that gets you to where you want to be. We support Java today, and we support IntelliJ. We do have on our roadmap many languages and many more IDEs. So if there is an environment that we don't support, please give me some feedback, and that'll help us prioritize on our roadmap. But I believe Python actually is very strong. Second language being supported pretty soon, and VS Code is also, I believe, in active development as a plugin as well.
Yeah, and likewise, I just a link to Fireway in the chat there. Like I said, I would love to just have people using it for real now. So if you go and you can sign up for free, I'll keep it free for you forever. Basically, my hope is to grow lots of users and make lots of money on it later. But for now, I just want people using it.
Okay, so I'm just gonna hold you to that really quick. You just said if you sign up for free, it's free forever for you.
Yeah, and I did that with Makaru too. There's probably like 200 or 300 Makaru users that I gave just free forever, just out of gratitude. Because that 0 to 1 is a hard leap if you've ever built a startup. Having users that actually like a thing and use it and rely on it. So I'm very gracious for those early adopters.
All right. If you're on the call, take advantage, sign up for Sapient and sign up for Fireway. You just got some free license promises from both founders. So I am definitely going to sign up for Fireway because I already am thinking about feeding it all of my recipes and then using it conversationally to help me, cook. But not just one use case, by the way. So you heard it here first. You got free licenses to both tools. I cannot thank you both enough. Thank you, Rishi. Thank you, Mark, for your time. Thank you, the audience, everyone who dialed in. This recording will be available on the website. I'll also be sending a follow-up email. Keep an eye out in your inbox. We're going to continue the conversation on the AI landscape of software engineers. So we're not stopping here. We're going to continue qualifying and understanding what's out there so you can make some better decisions to help you with your day-to-day software engineering needs. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you all.
See you later.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. Thank you, Mark.